So remember that you've got the steps here, and then I'll number them to help that out, okay? And when you have your stuff, you have your water, your sponge, your metal scraper. So this is to throw with, this is to smooth at the end, needle tool to trim the rim top. You've got your wooden knife that you use to take off extra clay at the bottom, and then your wire tool to cut it off, okay? All right, so you're gonna get your clay. You wanna get it, try to get it in the center as much as possible. Sorry, everybody, sorry, okay? All right, so if we look at, or we just remember our steps, the first one is, the first few steps, you want your wheel going fast, okay? So as fast as it can go. And you've got two different types of centering positions, and 1 and 2 can be kind of flip-floppy back and forth. So I'm gonna do centering position 2, which is one hand on the side and then a fist down on the top, and that'll kind of glue your clay down to your bat. So those of you that had issues last semester, last year, in it like sliding off all the time, use this position first, okay? All right, so I've got my sponge. I'll just kind of hold that as a hydrator. This I'm just going to brace. I'm using this part of my palm and kind of angling it this way. So I'm just kind of sitting there as a brace, but then I'm going to use most of my force on my hand here and pushing down. Okay, so I'm just kind of getting it glued onto the bat right now, okay? All right, so you'll see that it's still kind of wobbly, which means that I need to go to position number 1 technically, and that's with your wrists are together and you push straight in front of you. Now, as you do this, your elbows should be anchored down onto your thighs the whole time, okay? So I've got centering position 1, and then when my hands start getting kind of hot from friction, get some more water. Okay, then we're gonna go back to the other position. Okay, so your goal with centering is, you guys can see it's wobbly. You can see that my hands are kind of rocking back and forth. Your goal is you want your hands in the clay to not rock anymore. You want it just to stay solid. So you're kind of like pushing inwards to the center of the clay, and you can use your thighs to kind of anchor yourself in and push your arms in. So I'm almost there, a little bit of moisture. So there, I've got it pretty close, okay? I like to do a technique called coning, which is where what I'm about to do, and that's gonna be me bringing the clay up and pushing it down a couple times, and that just kind of gets the clay like a rotating like memory within the clay. So we're gonna do that, so pull up. You gotta be careful when you do that, because if you pull too hard and too fast, you're gonna pull the bat up off of the wheel head. So I'm not really expecting you guys to do that, but you can. Ooh, this clay's pretty firm too. Okay. So just working at getting equal amount of pressure centered into the middle of the clay. All right, so there it is centered, okay? So then your wheel's still going fast, and your next move is drilling the well. You can also do this 2 different ways. You can put your thumbs together, anchor your elbows down, and you go about 2/3 of the way down. Or you can brace your hand here, connect your thumbs together like this, and you can then make your fingers be the well driller that way and go, so whatever way you're comfortable with, okay? So I kind of like to start this way first, and this clay is pretty tough, so I'm not getting it completely on center. You gotta be careful, because you can get the center of it off. Oh, and I've got some air bubbles. So kind of so I'll go about halfway in this position, and then I'll kind of switch over to this position to make sure that I've got the center, the middle on center again. So I'm pretty wobbly in there. And I'm gonna have to work to do some recorrecting. Got a big air bubble in there, that's why. Okay, so you guys can see how it's kind of wobbly again. Means it's off center, but that's okay. I can work to get it corrected out. Okay, so I've drilled the well. I made sure that I didn't go all the way down. You want to be careful about that because this is now the inside of what your form's going to be. And the next one is pulling the clay out. Okay, so you can either use, that's why some people like to do this position because then they can go just straight to pulling, or you can put these two fingers together and pull directly towards you, whichever way. So your wheel's going fast, hands are moving a little slower, and I'm gonna do this position because I want to use this hand to brace the outside to try and get this guy back on center. So I'm gonna use some pressure out here to get this back on center, and then I'm gonna use this part of my fingers and kind of pull and push down to get the inside of it on center. Does that make sense? So it's like I'm trying to center two things at one time, the outside and the inside. Okay. So I'm just pulling, so all I really did is I didn't really move either of my hands. I used this as a support, but then I just pulled my fingers toward me, okay? And that's what opened it up. Okay, now what I'm gonna do, so what's throwing it off center is these air bubbles that are on the inside. You can get rid of air bubbles in two different ways. You can either stop your wheel, kind of find where they are and stab them with a needle tool to let the air come out, or you can compress your clay, which is what I'm doing right now, and you end up popping them on your own. So there, I just got rid of that. So clay compression on the bottom. This keeps your pieces from cracking on the bottom. And if what this is you can use your fingers with a sponge is good. You start like, let's say you've got your piece, here's the center, and you're pressing down with your sponge and you're just kind of moving your hand back and forth, back and forth. And so what that's doing is all of your clay particles are like this in there, and when you compress, you start to get them to align, and that makes it stronger. So that's why it won't crack, okay? All right, so I'm gonna work through this. I've still got some air bubbles in there, which is why it's off center. And go back to going real fast. So here I'm gonna kind of work at, I've done a little bit of compression, and I'm gonna continue kind of recentering, so I'm kind of pushing some things back in a little bit, because I think I want to make just like a tall mug shape, and then I can re-show how to do handles. So mugs are generally taller than they are wider, because if they're wider than they are tall, they're bowls. So I'm kind of pushing it back in there because I pulled it out just a little too much, and this will be a pretty tall mug. Okay, still kind of working at compressing that bottom. It's a little uneven. All right, and that's a little bit better than it was. Okay, now is where you change the speed of your wheel. So once you get everything back on center, you've got the wheel drilled, you've compressed, that's a biggie. Now you're ready to raise. So you want to slow your wheel down, and you guys will probably be going about this slow. I personally, because I've thrown so much, I can do it a lot faster. So I'm going to do a couple pulls slow at the speed that you guys should be doing, and then I'm going to speed up just to make this demonstration faster, okay? I don't even know if I can personally go that slow anymore. Okay, so what you do here is you have one hand, like your left hand if you're right-handed, and these two fingers, you're bracing them within the bottom. So they're not really doing anything except being support, okay? Then on the outside, with your sponge, you can take your middle finger and just kind of get it positioned in your sponge that way. And you're gonna start on the bat and you're gonna push down. And then as you get closer to the clay, you're gonna keep that same pressure. And you can start by making kind of a finger ridge. You guys see that ridge that's starting there? Mm-hmm. So you can make that ridge, and that's what your finger hooks under, and then you pull it upwards. As you pull upwards, you need to lessen your pressure more and more and more, okay? So the key thing on this too is don't let your hands go faster than the wheel is going around, okay? So if you come in and you do a pull like this, it's gonna be really uneven, and you're gonna get like a swooshy spiral in there. So just go nice and slow, okay? All right, so I've got my fingers in here to brace, elbows down on my thighs, making my little finger ridge, and then I go ahead and connect my hands with my thumb going on that knuckle there to make it all one like machine, okay? All right, so here we go. All right, so you guys see that? Okay, so I'm pulling the clay. And I'm lessening my pressure more and more and more until I just come right off the clay. Okay? You guys remember what the last step was from last year?
Oh, I know.
Yeah? What is it?
Sealing the lip.
Sealing the lip. Good. Okay, so you you're not making any you're just supporting it here, so you're kind of pinching, but it's just support. You're not really pinching in there. And then you're just pushing down with this top finger. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to do one more pull slow. And then I'm going to speed up and finish it faster. Still got a big old air bubble in there, so this might get pretty wonky. Which will be good, because then I'll be able to use the needle tool to slice off the top. Okay. All right, so your goal when you raise is you want to get all of this clay to be up here. All right, so you need to have more pressure down here, less pressure here. And then as you're pulling, you don't want to stop in the middle. You just want to keep going. Okay, so I'm going to speed up. Okay, so you guys can see where I'm kind of fighting that air bubble, fighting it being off center a little bit. Okay, so I come off the pull, seal my lip. I'm gonna get the water out of the bottom of it because water likes to disintegrate clay. Disintegrate? What is that? That was like disintegrate and incinerate at the same time. Okay, so. Okay, I'm making my little finger ridge. Okay. So that air bubble that I'm fighting is giving me a thin spot in there. So I'm going to try and work through it the best I can. We'll see what happens. This isn't going to be as tall as I thought it was going to be. Okay.
Pretty tall.
Yeah.
And the amount of clay will also change on how wide or how tall something will be. Okay, so the more clay that you have, the taller it could potentially be, or the wider it could potentially be.
It's just amazing.
Okay. Alright, I think I'm going to do one more pull, and then I'm going to call it good and start with all the finishing stuff. Okay, there's times where when you start getting tall, you can lift up your arm that's going in the inside, but still have your other elbow anchored. You need to just try and make sure that you have at least one or both arms anchored at all times. Ooh. Okay. All right, good. So you guys can see kind of the effects of what air bubbles will do as you're throwing. So you can kind of see that weak spot right in there. You'll see it come around. See that kind of dent?
Yeah.
Thanks, Logan. And then the top here is uneven and I can trim that. I'm gonna wait until she's videoing. Is she needing to, okay, so trade with Logan here. And then you'll go answer the phone. This is funny. Oh, they call it the most inconvenient times. Okay, so I'm just gonna maybe work on shaping it a little bit while Jenna's on the phone so she doesn't miss anything.
Trim the top to where that.
Yep, I'm gonna trim it using the needle tool. And then I'll shape everything up. Okay.
This is really funny. Okay.
It'll be a good demo video. Okay, so first thing before I start shaping is I want to get rid of like clay that I don't need. So I'm gonna get rid of this uneven top and I'm gonna get rid of this heavy bottom here. So whenever you use your needle tool to take off the top, to trim the rim up, you have to go underneath your lowest point. So it's almost like sealing the lip, in that you want to support your clay between these two fingers. And then the way that I do it is I take my needle tool and I support it at the top of my thumb, and then I will gradually push the needle tool in until it touches my other finger, and then I lift when I'm done. Okay, so I'm pinching. I'm gonna anchor this needle tool, and then I'm gonna pull. Oh! Sometimes that happens, that's okay. So you guys can kind of see that in cutting this, oh, I'm just trying to dig that piece out. Me fighting that air bubble in there the whole time, it's given me different thicknesses. So I'm really thin here, but I'm thicker over here because it got off center. So whenever you have something like that where it's thin on one side, thick on the other, it's because it was off center while you were raising or throwing. Okay, so we got that. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my wooden knife here. Trim off this excess. Well, it's not one of my better ones.
Hey, a mug's a mug.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so you take all this off. So this is the kind of stuff that needs to just be, you either throw it back in your own clay bag and re-wedge it to use, or you just toss it when you're done. Water can go down the sink, and then if you have good slip, you can dump that in the slip jar, okay? Yep, so now I'm gonna kind of work on smoothing and shaping. So I'm gonna start with my sponge, and I may have to trim the top of it as well. But now this is where I can use my metal scraper. You have to be careful about this. If you get a buildup of clay, you need to use your sponge to get it off, because if you come and try and take your clay off like this, these suckers get so sharp, they will slice your hands open, okay? And I've done it, so you gotta be careful. Okay, so to use this, it's almost kind of like, or you can do that. Yeah. So the way that I use this is you can mold this, you know, you can flex it in your hand to kind of get the curve that you want. There's a curve and there's a flat side, so it kind of depends. I like using the curved side personally. The hand on the inside is just there to support, okay? So the fingers on the inside will kind of slightly push outwards, while the rib hand stays more just as a support. So it's not really moving that much, it's just a support out there. Okay, that gets all the scummy off. Seal the lip again. So here's where it's a pretty boring shape, so I can decide, okay, how do I want it to look? Do I want it to bulb out? Do I want it to be like really circular? Do I want just a hint? Do I want it to flare? So you kind of just start deciding on what shapes you want. If you want it to go out, the fingers that are on the inside, you push them outwards. If you want them to go in, you're gonna change these to just being support fingers, and you're gonna push more in with your rib, okay? Okay, so I think I'm gonna kind of bulb it up carefully. You guys can see that it's getting off center. Yeah, that's what dealing with that. So you can see how air bubbles can cause you problems the whole time that you're throwing, and then you just have to work through it the best that you can. So what I might do is I might get this in kind of a shape that I want, and then trick everybody and put like a spiral in it. Okay. So, okay, that happens. Don't go and try it. Just stop your wheel and just peel it off because these like to stick. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick finish here, and I'm just gonna.
Neat.
And I can accentuate that even more if I want. Some wet. So I'm kind of trying to put like some throwing rings in there, some texture, and then hopefully if I can move this fast. So I'm kind of making the wonky be a part of this cup. And that'll work. So I know it looks really wonky, but
Still looks really good.
yeah. So last thing I'm gonna do before I, let's see. Yeah, get all the water out. I'm gonna trim the rim of it one more time. Cause slowed down a lot for that. Cause I just got such different thicknesses going on here. You want to make it, if you're going to actually drink out of it, you want to make it pleasant to drink out of, so you don't want sharp edges. And I'm going to see if I can maybe flare this out a little bit. But not leave it a sharp edge. Okay, last little thing, gonna make a little indentation here for my wire tool to go under. Okay, and then last thing, when you cut it with your wire, you can put a little bit of a puddle there. And that's it. Okay, so, oops. So you can either, the reason you guys have bats is so you can just take the whole bat off and go put it in your shelf. If you get into a production mode one day and you just want to keep reusing what you've got going on, you can cut them and then you can pick up your pieces and go set them wherever you need to. In the cart, there's also a set of like metal pot lifters. So you can get those, and they basically just do what I just did, just with metal pieces. Okay? All right, and that should be it. Thanks.